The call came on a Thursday. Marco Reyes had just finished his shift at the hotel, still wearing his uniform, black slacks, white button-down with the Harrington Grand emblem stitched above the pocket, when his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. He let it ring twice before picking it up, the way he always did, giving himself those 2 seconds to remember that he was a father first and everything else second. "Dad!" Sofia's voice came through clear and close, the way it always did when she was trying not to sound worried and failing completely. "Are you still coming home for dinner?" 10 minutes, he said. "I'm already out the door." She didn't say anything for a moment. He could hear the television in the background, something animated, something with a song in it. She was 9 years old. She still watched cartoons with the earnest investment of someone who believed every story was going to turn out right. "Okay," she said. "I save you the good bowl." He smiled, locked the apartment door behind him, and walked the 4 blocks home through the warm September evening, his jacket folded over his arm, his shoes quiet on the sidewalk. The neighborhood was the kind that didn't appear in any travel magazine, but was beautiful anyway. A bakery that had been owned by the same family for 30 years, a mural on the side of the pharmacy building painted by a local high school art class, the old men who played dominoes outside the corner bodega every evening until the light failed. Marco had lived here for 6 years. He knew the names of the dogs. He knew which neighbors needed their groceries carried upstairs and which ones preferred to be left alone. He knew the particular hum of this street at 8 in the evening, and it was the sound of something real. Sofia had set the table. She did this sometimes, not asked, just decided it needed to be done and did it the way she handled most things that require deciding. 2 plates, 2 glasses, the paper napkins folded into rough triangles that she had taught herself from video online. In the center of the table, a small vase with 3 stems of the yellow flowers she'd picked from the planter on the windowsill that he kept meaning to replace. "You pick my flowers," he said. They were going to fall off anyway. She sat down with the authority of someone who had already considered all objections. "I made pasta. The kind with the red sauce from the jar. I added garlic like you taught me." He sat across from her. The pasta was, as promised, the kind with the red sauce from the jar. The garlic was generous. It was the best thing he'd eaten all day. "Mrs. Pacheco stopped me on the stairs," Sofia said. "She wants to know if you're going to fix her window again this winter." "I'll stop by Saturday. She said she has tamales for you." "Then I'll definitely stop by Saturday." Sofia looked at him over her pasta with the expression she made when she was deciding whether to say something. It was her mother's expression. He had noticed this when Sofia was 3 years old and had been quietly startled by it ever since. Isabella had made that same careful face, that exact same slight narrowing of attention, whenever she was about to say something that mattered. "Dad," Sofia said, "are you nervous about Saturday?" Saturday was the day he was taking Elena Voss to meet his family. Not Sofia's family, his family. His mother, his 2 older brothers, his aunts who arrived early and stayed late and had opinions about everything, including things they had no information about whatsoever. He had been putting this off for 4 months, which was how long he had been seeing Elena, which meant he had been putting it off since the beginning. "A little," he said. "She's nice," Sofia said. "She won't be scared. It's not her I'm worried about." Sofia considered this. "Your family is loud," she said, "but they're not mean. They ask a lot of questions. That's because they care." She said it simply, the way 9-year-olds say things that take adults years to understand. If they didn't care, they wouldn't ask anything. Marco looked at his daughter. She had his dark eyes and her mother's hair and a way of arriving at the center of things that neither of them had taught her. It had simply arrived with her, the way some things do, fully formed, already true. "When did you get so smart?" he said. She shrugged. "I've always been smart. You just notice it sometimes." He laughed, and it was real, and she looked pleased, and they finished their pasta in the particular piece that exists in a home where 2 people have learned to take care of each other. He had come to the hotel 7 years ago, when Sofia was 2 and Isabella was gone, and the apartment on Crestwood Avenue was as a name only, the lease still in both their names, the second coffee mug still in the cabinet, the universe stubbornly failing to update itself to the new facts. He had needed work that was consistent and covered the daycare hours, and the Harrington Grand had a morning shift that started at 6 and ended at 2 and paid enough, barely, to keep the number in his checking account on the correct side of zero. He had started as a porter. He had learned the building the way he learned most things, carefully, thoroughly, without announcing it. Within a year, he knew every room, every mechanical system, every vendor, every guest complaint pattern. He knew which elevator ran slow on cold mornings, and which corridor smelled of must when it rained, and which conference room had a sound problem that 3 different contractors had failed to diagnose. He had diagnosed it himself on a Tuesday afternoon with no training and a borrowed toolkit, and the hotel manager at the time, a distracted man named Ellison, had looked at the repair and said, "How did you know how to do that?" "I just looked at it," Marco said. Ellison had stared at him for a moment in a way that was not quite recognition, but was close to it. "You're wasted in the porter role," he said. "I know. I can't promote you right now. Budget. I know that too." Ellison had looked at him for another moment and then walked away. 2 months later, he transferred to a larger property upstate, and a new manager came in, a woman named Sandra Park, who asked better questions than Ellison and listened to the answers. And within 6 months, Marco was the front operations supervisor, which was a title that meant he solved every problem that fell between the formal categories, which was most of the real problems. He was good at it. He was good at seeing what was actually happening as opposed to what was supposed to be happening. He was good at staying calm when the situation argued against calm. He was good at understanding what people needed when what they were asking for and what they needed were not the same thing, which was more often than people admitted. He had never thought of these qualities as extraordinary. They were just how he moved through the world. He met Elena Voss in March, in the hotel lobby, during a fire alarm that turned out to be a kitchen incident involving a food warmer and an ambitious sous chef. The building had evacuated. It was raining. The guests were standing under the narrow overhang at the front entrance in various states of undress and irritation, and Marco was managing the chaos, directing, apologizing, problem-solving, when he noticed a woman standing slightly apart from the crowd, holding her laptop against her chest, watching the operation with an expression that was not the usual mix of annoyance and entitlement. She was watching the way someone watches when they actually see what they're looking at. She was dressed simply, dark jeans, a pale blue shirt, her hair pulled back. She had no luggage cart, no assistant, no visible markers of the kind of status that sometimes announced itself loudly in hotel lobbies. She looked like a person who had arrived somewhere and was waiting to see what happened next. When Marco reached her with an umbrella, he always brought umbrellas from the concierge storage to guests who were caught in the rain, a small thing he did without thinking. She thanked him and then said, "Is this how you usually run an evacuation?" "The rain is unusual," he said. "The evacuation is fairly standard." "You've directed 6 people to the wrong exit," she said. Not accusatory. Observational. He looked where she was pointing. She was right. "Thank you," he said, and redirected them. And when he turned back, she was still standing there with the umbrella, and something in the quality of her attention, the way she watched without performing, the way she waited without fidgeting, made him want to know what she was thinking. They ended up talking for 20 minutes in the rain while the fire brigade cleared the building. She was direct without being aggressive. She asked questions and listened to the actual answers. She laughed twice at things he said, real laughter, the kind that surprised her slightly, as though she hadn't expected to find anything funny and was caught off guard by it. He asked if she'd like to have coffee once the building was clear. She said she had a meeting. After the meeting, he said. She looked at him for a moment. That careful consideration, that same slight narrowing of attention he would later recognize from Sofia's face when she was deciding whether to say something. "All right," she said. "After the meeting, for months of after the meeting, for months of dinners that started early because he had to be home for Sofia, of Saturday afternoons at the park where Sofia rode her bike in focused circles and Elena sat on the bench with her coffee and watched with what appeared to be genuine interest, of long phone calls after Sofia was asleep when they talked about small things and large things with equal care. He had told her about Isabella on their 3rd date, the whole truth of it, the aneurysm at 31, the 2 years before that when it was just the 3 of them, and then suddenly just the 2 of them, the specific shape of that grief, which was not a wave the way people described it, but more like a change in air pressure, a permanent adjustment to the atmosphere of things. Elena had listened without rushing to comfort him. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Sofia is remarkable. She is. She got that from somewhere." He had not known what to say to that. He had looked at his coffee. "You're allowed to believe that," Elena said quietly. "Grief doesn't disqualify you from also being exceptional." He had thought about that for a long time afterward. He proposed in July. They were in his kitchen, late on a Sunday, Sofia asleep down the hall, the city outside making its usual quiet sounds. He had not planned a grand gesture. He had thought about it for weeks, turning it over, and what he kept arriving at was that the most honest thing he could do was simply be honest. He had pulled the ring from his jacket pocket, his grandmother's ring, resized a small diamond in a simple setting, and he had said, "I would like to do this with you. All of it, if you want that too." Elena had looked at the ring for a moment. Then she looked at him. "Yes," she said, "I want that." Sofia had appeared in the kitchen doorway approximately 4 minutes later, blinking in the light, hair at maximum chaos. She looked at the ring on Elena's hand. She looked at her father. She looked back at Elena. "Does this mean you're staying?" she said. "Yes," Elena said. Sofia nodded once, with the gravity of someone ratifying a decision that has already been made. Then she went back to bed. Marco looked at Elena. Elena looked at the doorway where Sofia had been. She approved. Marco said, "I noticed," Elena said, and smiled, and it was the kind of smile that changes the geometry of a face. The wedding was planned for November 2nd, a Saturday, at a small venue in the neighborhood. The garden of the old Castillo house, which had been converted into an event space by the family who had owned it for 3 generations. Marco had worked for 4 months on the details. Not the extravagant details, the flowers, the catering, the small things that made a day feel like itself rather than a performance of a day. He had met Elena's family twice. Brief, cordial meetings, a dinner in June, a lunch in August. Her parents, Bernard and Constance Voss, were polite in the way that contains distance, the way politeness functions as a wall dressed up as a door. Her brother, Philip, had the particular brand of friendliness that never quite reached his eyes. Her sister, Catherine, had been warmer, though something in her warmth felt borrowed, as if she were working from a template she'd been given. He had not thought too much about it. People took time. He understood that. He was a patient man. The call came on the second Friday of October, 3 weeks before the wedding. He was in the hotel lobby when his phone buzzed. Elena's number. He stepped outside, into the afternoon light, the street busy around him. "Marco." Her voice was careful, the kind of careful that costs something. "My family wants to meet with you. Tonight, if you can." "Of course," he said. "Is everything okay?" A pause. 1 second too long. "I'll explain when I see you," she said. The Voss house was in the newer part of the city, the part where the streets were wide and the buildings announced themselves. Bernard Voss opened the door himself, which Marco noted, because men like Bernard Voss did not usually open their own doors when they wanted you to understand that you were a guest and they were the host. They sat in the living room. Elena was there, and Philip, and Constance, and Catherine, and 2 people Marco didn't recognize. A man in a suit who had the bearing of someone who carries documents for a living, and an older woman who appeared to be Bernard's sister. The room was arranged with the specific geometry of a conversation that has been planned in advance. Marco sat. He did not say anything. He had learned, in 7 years of managing situations in which something had gone wrong and everyone was waiting to see how it would be handled, that the first person to speak defined the terms of the conversation. He would not define these terms. He would wait and learn what they were. Bernard spoke first. "We want to talk to you about November," he said. "All right," Marco said. "We've given this a great deal of thought." Bernard paused. The pause had the quality of rehearsal. "We feel that Elena is making this decision too quickly. We feel that a longer engagement period would be." "My family has concerns," Constance said. She said it the way people say things when they have decided to be the one who says the real thing. "About your circumstances. About what you're able to provide." Marco looked at her. "My circumstances," he said. "You work at a hotel," Philip said. He said it with the specific care of someone who believes he is being restrained. You rent an apartment. You have a child from a previous. Philip. Elena's voice was sharp. It's a relevant consideration, Philip said. We're not saying anything that isn't true. You work at a hotel. Constance again, more gently, as if gentleness would make it land differently. Elena has a particular life, particular expectations. We simply want to make sure that I understand what I'm getting into, Marco said. A silence. Yes, Bernard said. Marco looked at the room. He looked at each face in turn. Bernard's careful distance, Constance's performed concern, Philip's poorly concealed contempt, the man with the documents, the silent aunt, Catherine with her borrowed warmth, and Elena, who was looking at her hands. He looked at Elena for a long moment. She was looking at her hands. He turned back to Bernard. What are you asking me to do? He said. Bernard looked at the man with the documents. The man with the documents opened his briefcase. We're asking you to postpone the wedding, Bernard said. Indefinitely. We're prepared to offer. No, Marco said. The room was very still. I'm not asking you to end the relationship, Bernard said carefully. Simply to take more time. To allow Elena to... I heard you, Marco said. My answer is no. He stood. He looked at Elena. She was still looking at her hands, and something in the way she was looking at them, the particular angle of her head, the stillness in her shoulders, told him something he had not known before he came into this room. Elena, he said. She looked up. Her eyes were clear, but the clarity cost something. Did you know this was what tonight was? He said. A pause. 2 seconds. 3. I knew they wanted to talk, she said. I didn't know the documents. He nodded. He picked up his jacket from the arm of the chair. I'll call you, he said. He said nothing to the rest of the room. He walked to the front door, opened it himself, and stepped out into the October night. He walked home. It was 40 minutes on foot, and he walked all of it, his hands in his pockets, the city making its sound around him. He was not angry, which surprised him slightly. He had expected anger and found instead something quieter, a kind of clarity, the specific brightness that comes when you finally see something that has been there the whole time. Mrs. Pacheco's light was on when he passed her floor. He could hear her television through the door. He kept walking. Sofia was asleep. He stood in her doorway for a moment. The way he did most nights, this exact pause, this particular inventory of the fact of her, and then went to the kitchen and made coffee and sat at the table in the quiet. He thought about what the Voss family believed they knew about him. He thought about the man with the documents. He thought about Bernard's voice, saying you work at a hotel in that tone, that specific tone that located a person in a hierarchy and found them wanting. He thought about the thing he had not told Elena yet, the thing he had been waiting to tell her at the right time, which he now understood he had been wrong about. There was no right time. There was only honesty and the choice to offer it or withhold it. He had withheld it, not from deception, from something more complicated than deception, a kind of privacy, a need to be known as himself before being known as the other thing. He had wanted Elena to choose him, not the other thing. He had wanted her family to refuse him as himself, not as the other thing, so that when they learned the other thing, it would reveal who they actually were. He understood now that this had been naive. Not wrong, but naive. He drank his coffee. He looked at the yellow flowers in the small vase on the table. Sofia had trimmed the stems slightly crooked. They were still beautiful. He picked up his phone. He did not call Elena. Not yet. He called his operations director instead. The Voss Group had 17 hotels in 6 cities. It had been founded by Bernard's father in 1971 and had grown through the 80s and 90s into a regional hospitality company of real significance. In 2019, facing debt and declining occupancy across 3 of its largest properties, it had quietly sought a buyer. The process had been handled with discretion. Bernard was proud, and pride has its own kind of grammar, its own way of insisting on certain silences. The buyer had been a holding company called Serato Capital, which was itself a subsidiary of a parent corporation that most people in the hospitality industry had never heard of because the parent corporation did not advertise itself, and its CEO had a specific preference for operating without being watched. The CEO's name was Marco Reyes. He had built Serato Capital over 8 years, starting with the repair savings he had accumulated while at the Harrington Grand, a loan from a credit union that had believed in the business plan he had spent 14 months writing in the hours after Sofia went to sleep, and a particular quality of attention to the mechanics of distressed hospitality assets that his background in operations had given him in ways that no business school had replicated for the people he later hired out of those schools. The Voss Group had been his 14th acquisition. He had restructured its debt, replaced its management systems, and retained most of its staff because he knew from 7 years of being the person that hotel management ignored and the guests didn't see that the real value of hospitality business was in the people who knew where the extra towels were kept and which guests needed their messages read back to them slowly. He had kept his name off the public filings. It was legal. It was common. It was, in his case, a choice he had made because he had watched too many people become their title before they had finished becoming themselves, and he had not wanted that for Sofia or for himself. He had met Elena at the Harrington Grand, which was a Cerrado property. He had not told her. He had not told her because he had wanted to know who she was before she knew who he was, and what he had found was someone who chose the man who stood in the rain redirecting evacuees, not the other thing. He had been about to tell her. He had been planning to tell her before the wedding, had been working toward it with the careful patience he applied to everything. He had not expected the conversation at the Voss house to arrive first. He did not go to the Voss house the next morning. He called his attorney instead, a quiet woman named Rosario who had been with him since the beginning and who received the account of the previous evening with the particular stillness of someone filing information for later use. "Do you want to make contact?" she said. "Not yet," he said. "What are you waiting for?" He thought about it. "Elena," he said. Elena called at noon. He answered on the first ring. "I'm sorry," she said. It was the first thing she said, and the way she said it carried everything. The evening, the documents, the silence where she had looked at her hands. "Don't apologize for them," he said. "I should have told you what the meeting was. I should have. I thought I could manage it. I thought if I was there I could." She stopped. "I didn't manage it." "No," he said. A silence. The kind that has texture in it. "Are you ending this?" she said. "No," he said. "I need to tell you something." He told her everything. Not in a grand revelation, not with drama or theater, but in the patient, factual way he told most things that mattered. Sitting at his kitchen table with Sofia at school, and the yellow flowers still on the table, and his coffee going cold while he talked. She listened without interrupting. She was very still on the other end of the phone, and he could not see her face, but he had learned her silences well enough in 4 months to know that this one was the kind that meant she was processing rather than withdrawing. When he finished, she said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "The hotel where we met." "Yes." "That's your hotel." "Yes." Another silence. "You watched me every day for 2 weeks before the fire alarm," she said. "I watch every one," he said. "It's the job. But yes, I noticed you specifically. Because of how I was watching," she said. Not a question. "Yes. You wanted to know if I saw things the way I actually saw them, or the way people see things when they know who they're looking at." "Yes," he said. She was quiet again. He waited. "I'm angry," she said finally. "I want you to know that. Not at you, not exactly. I understand why. But I'm angry at the situation, and I'm angry that my family—" She stopped. "I'm angry that they made you feel like you had to prove something." "I didn't have to prove anything," he said. "I knew who I was." "I know," she said. "That's the part that makes me angriest." He did not expect what happened next. He had expected, perhaps, a quiet resolution, a phone call for Bernard, carefully worded, recalibrating. He had expected the specific grammar of men like Bernard Voss recalibrating, which sounded like graciousness and meant calculation. He had been prepared for it. He had prepared Rosario for it. What he had not prepared for was Saturday. Saturday was the family lunch his mother had organized 3 weeks earlier, the original plan, the one he had been nervous about, his family meeting Elena. It had not been canceled. He had not thought to cancel it. And Elena, when he told her the story of Thursday evening, had said, "I still want to go." "You don't have to," he said. "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to." His mother's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been in the family since before Marco was born. His brother Carlos had driven up from 2 hours away. His brother Diego had brought his wife and 3 children. His aunts, Tia Marta, Tia Rosa, and Tia Claudia, who was technically a second cousin but had always been counted as an aunt, had arrived an hour early because they always arrive an hour early and had already reorganized the kitchen. When Marco arrived with Elena and Sofia, the apartment smelled of rice and something with garlic that had been cooking since morning, and the particular warm noise of a house full of people who love each other loudly was already filling the hallway. Sofia went directly to the kitchen, where she had discovered on a previous visit that Tia Rosa kept a jar of butter cookies at counter height. Elena stood in the entrance hall and looked at the apartment, the family photographs covering most of one wall, the tablecloth his grandmother had made, the sound of Spanish and laughter, and a child running somewhere in the back rooms. And her face did something he had not seen it do before. She looked like someone who had arrived somewhere they had been looking for without knowing they were looking. "This is your home," she said. "Not the apartment. The atmosphere." "Yes," he said. His mother came out of the kitchen. She was a small woman who had the specific gravity of someone much larger, the kind of presence that reorganizes a room when it enters. She looked at Elena. Elena looked at her. "You're the one," his mother said. "I hope so," Elena said. His mother nodded once, with the same gravity Sofia used when ratifying decisions, and went back to the kitchen. Carlos appeared from the living room. He shook Elena's hand and then said to Marco, in Spanish, "She's not nervous at all." "I know," Marco said. "I like her." "I know." The lunch went for 4 hours. There were questions. His aunts asked questions the way weather systems produce precipitation, continuously and without particular concern for the effect, and Elena answered all of them without deflection or performance. She was direct. She was curious. She asked his mother about the photograph on the wall that showed his grandfather in front of the building Marco had never thought to ask about, and his mother talked for 20 minutes, and Elena listened with the same quality of attention she had used watching the evacuation in the rain. Actually present, actually there. Sofia fell asleep on the couch between Tia Marta and Diego's youngest, the three of them in a pile under a blanket that no one had arranged because it had simply happened, the way things happen in houses where children and warmth are both abundant. Marco watched his daughter sleep. He watched Elena talking with his mother in the kitchen, both of them leaning against the counter in the way women lean when they have arrived at the part of the conversation that matters. He watched Diego's children arguing cheerfully over the last of the butter cookies while Tia Rosa pretended not to notice. He thought about Thursday evening, the room arranged for a confrontation, the man with the documents, the silence when Elena looked at her hands. He thought about what Bernard Voss believed he had understood about Marco Reyes. He thought about the 14 acquisitions, the 8 years, the credit union loan, the 14 months of business plans written after Sofia went to sleep. He thought about the fact that the Voss Group's debt restructuring, its recovered occupancy rates, its stabilized workforce, all of it had flowed from decisions made in an office that Bernard had never seen by a man Bernard believed he had successfully intimidated on a Thursday evening in October. He had not been angry Thursday night. He was not angry now. What he felt was something more specific, a kind of settled patience, the feeling of a man who knows that the right facts will arrive in the right order if he lets them. He had a board meeting on Monday. The Voss Group's quarterly review. Standard procedure. He had been attending these meetings by proxy for 2 years. He would attend this one in person. He wore his usual clothes. Dark trousers, a simple jacket, the kind of clothes that communicated competence without announcing ambition. He did not bring Rosario, though she had offered. He brought only Marcus, his operations director, who was very good at being invisible when that was what the situation required and very good at being present when it wasn't. The Voss Group boardroom was on the 14th floor of their corporate building. Marco had been in this building before, but always as a name on a document, an entity represented by proxy. He had never stood at the elevator bank and waited for the doors to open on a floor that his company owned. The board was already seated when he arrived. Bernard Voss was at the head of the table. Philip sat to his left. The usual executives occupied their usual positions. There was a chair at the far end of the table that had been set for the Cerrado representative, his usual proxy, who was not in attendance today. Marco sat in that chair. Bernard looked at him. The specific quality of confusion on Bernard Voss's face, the way recognition and non-recognition competed for the same space, was something Marco would remember with a precision that was not satisfaction, exactly, but was close enough to warrant the distinction. "Mr. Reyes," said the Voss Group's general counsel, a woman named Adiz Okafor who had been with the company for 11 years and who, Marco knew from his review of the personnel files, had tried twice to flag concerns about the company's debt structure before she had been overruled by Bernard. "We weren't expecting you to attend personally." "I thought it was time," Marco said. He looked at Bernard. Bernard was very still. "I believe you've met," Adiz said, and then stopped because she had realized as she was saying it that the sentence required a context she didn't have. "We have," Marco said, briefly. "Thursday evening." He set a folder on the table. Not documents, just the quarterly report he'd reviewed on the way over. "Let's talk about the numbers." He didn't perform it. That was the thing he wanted most. Later, when he thought about it, he had not performed it. There was no theater, no dramatic unveiling, no moment designed for an audience. He simply did what he had always done in rooms where something needed to be handled. He looked at the situation clearly. He said what was true, and he let the facts arrange themselves. The facts, in this case, arranged themselves with a quiet efficiency that needed no assistance. Bernard Voss sat at the head of a table in a room that belonged to a company that belonged to Marco Reyes. Philip sat to his left with the expression of a man who has been certain of something and has discovered that certainty is not the same as accuracy. The board members who did not know the backstory absorbed it gradually from the edges of the conversation, the way temperature spreads through a room. First the corner by the window, then the center, then everywhere. Adiz Okafor asked 3 precise questions about the restructuring timeline, received 3 precise answers, and made 3 notes in her folder with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting a long time for the meeting where the right information was finally in the room. Afterward, Marco stayed to speak with her privately. He told her that the director of finance position that had been promised to her twice and denied twice had been approved and was effective immediately. She looked at him with the specific expression of someone who has received good news and is waiting to understand what it costs. "There are no conditions," he said. She nodded slowly. He left the building the way he had entered it, quietly, without announcement. Marcus fell in a step beside him on the sidewalk. "Bernard Voss is going to call," Marcus said. "I know. What do you want me to tell him?" "Tell him I'll return his call this week." Marco paused at the corner, waiting for the light. "On my schedule." Bernard called that evening. Marco returned the call from his kitchen, sitting at the table with the yellow flowers, which Sofia had replaced with a fresh set from the windowsill planter. "Mr. Reyes." Bernard's voice had changed. The specific distance was still there, but the architecture under it had shifted. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There hasn't," Marco said. A silence. "I didn't know who you were," Bernard said. "I know," Marco said. "That was the point." Another silence. Longer this time. What we said on Thursday evening." "You said what you believed," Marco said. "I'm not interested in relitigating it." "Then what are you interested in?" Marco thought about Thursday evening. About the man with the documents. About Elena's hands. About Sofia asleep on the couch under the blanket. About his mother leaning on the kitchen counter and talking to Elena with the ease of a woman who has made a determination and settled it. "Elena is who she is regardless of who I am," he said. "I want you to understand that. I want you to sit with the fact that you looked at a man and decided what he was worth based on his job title. And then I want you to understand that your assessment was wrong in every measurable way. And then I want you to understand that it would have been wrong even if your assessment had been financially accurate." A long silence. "My daughter loves him," Bernard said. It was not a complete sentence. It was not meant to be. "Yes," Marco said. "She doesn't, she's not." He stopped. Started again. "Elena doesn't do things without thought. She's not impulsive. If she's chosen." "She has," Marco said. The silence this time was different. It had the quality of something being set down. "I'd like to," Bernard started. Stopped. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing," Marco said. "The apology belongs to Elena." November 2nd was a Saturday, which it had always been, and the garden at the Castillo house was hung with the small lights that the venue had used for every event for 30 years, and the evening was warm for November in a way that felt like a gift from a season that was usually less generous. Sofia wore a green dress she had chosen herself, and shoes that were slightly too formal for her age and completely right for her personality. She stood at Marco's side for the ceremony with the grave attention she brought to things that required attention. And when the officiant asked if anyone had words, Sofia raised her hand with the specific confidence of someone who has been waiting for their moment and said, "I have something." The officiant looked at Marco. Marco nodded. Sofia turned to Elena. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," she said, with the careful pacing of someone who has rehearsed and has decided to honor the rehearsal. "My dad is the best person I know. He fixes things when they're broken, and he stays calm when other people aren't calm, and he always comes home." She paused. "And you're the best person for him, because you see him, not the job or the—" She made a gesture that encompassed something large, the other stuff. "You just see him." She looked at the assembled faces. Her grandmother, who was crying quietly. Tia Marta, Tia Rosa, Tia Claudia, all three of them in a row, all three of them crying. Diego's children, who were not crying because they were 8 and 6 and 4 and more interested in the flowers. Carlos, who was not crying but was making the face he made when he was close. Bernard and Constance Voss sat in the second row. Bernard had the expression of a man who has learned something that reorganized everything that came before it, and who is still in the process of reorganizing. Constance had her hands folded in her lap and was watching Sofia with an attention that looked like recognition. Catherine was crying. Philip was not there. This was his choice, and Marco had respected it. Sofia looked at Elena. "I'm glad you said yes," she said. "And I'm glad you stayed." Elena said, "Me too." Sofia nodded, satisfied, and stepped back to her position. Later, much later, after the dancing and the food and the speeches, Carlos gave a speech that was both embarrassing and accurate, which was the only kind worth giving. Marco stood in the garden with Elena, while Sofia slept inside on a couch with Diego's children, the four of them in a pile that had assembled itself as naturally as weather. The garden was quiet now. The small lights still hung in the trees. The evening had kept its warmth. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "Yes," she said. She wasn't angry. She had already said everything that needed to be said about it, and she was done with it the way she was done with things she'd processed fully. "I wanted you to choose me," he said. "I did," she said. "I chose the man in the rain who counted what was actually happening and then did something about it." She looked at him. "That's who I chose. The rest of it is yours. It doesn't change what I chose." He looked at the lights and the trees. He thought about 7 years and 14 months of business plans and a credit union that said yes, and the particular weight of being alone in an apartment with a 2-year-old daughter and not knowing anything except that you would not stop. Sofia was right, Elena said. "You always come home." "Yes," he said. She leaned against him. They stood in the quiet garden while the city made its sounds around the walls, and the lights moved slightly in a breeze that had come up from the direction of the river. He thought about the room on Thursday evening. The arranged chairs, the man with the documents, the silence when he said no. He thought about the board meeting and Adiz Okafor's 3 precise questions and the expression on Bernard Voss's face. He thought about his mother's apartment and the wall of photographs and the butter cookies and Sofia asleep between 2 people she had known for 6 hours and already trusted completely. He thought about the particular truth his daughter had spoken in a green dress with slightly too formal shoes in front of everyone who mattered. You see him, not the job, not the other stuff. You just see him. He had spent 8 years building something no one was supposed to see. He had done it because he wanted to be known before the other thing was known. He had done it because Isabella had known him before he was anything, and he had carried that particular kind of being known as the standard by which all other knowing was measured. Elena had seen him on a Tuesday afternoon through rain and fire alarm chaos and redirected exits. She had seen the man. The rest had followed. That was the only order that had ever made sense to him. The only order that was worth anything. Sofia, when he went to collect her from the inside couch, woke at his approach with the immediate alertness she had always had, as if she slept with part of herself, always listening for the sound of him returning. "Is it over?" she said. "The ceremony," he said. "Yes, but not the other part," she said. He looked at her. She had her mother's eyes and his patience and something entirely her own that neither of them had given her. "No," he said, "not the other part." She nodded and reached for his hand, and he took it, and they walked back out into the garden where the lights were still on and Elena was waiting and the evening had not yet finished being warm. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. The people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, the videos on your screen right now are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. Quiet Kind has a story for you.